Hello, my friend My Two Cents is going to be doing today's video. He is an awesome YouTuber. If you like the following video, be sure to subscribe to him. Link in the description box.
Get one free.
Is that like a Spanish word?
No, it's English. The whole thing's English.
Oh, because it seems like you're saying the first part in English and then some kind of made-up falum for something in the second part. I don't understand you.
All right, let me try explaining it another way. Let's say we're at someone else's store, and there's a sign, and it says, buy one, get one free.
Get one free? Wow! What store are you talking about?
This video was made possible by my patrons, Joshua Bartlett, James Schubach, Douglas Smith, Capitalism is Good, and Pipsqueak. Thank you so much to all of you. Hello everyone, this is My Two Cents. Today we're again going to be looking at the topic of Universal Basic Income, or UBI. I've already covered this topic extensively before, but Mr. Dapperton brought this particular video to my attention, noting that it had far more views and was trending. That being said, I felt it merited a response. If you'd like a more in-depth explanation about why UBI is a bad idea, my previous video will be linked in the description. For now, let's get into it.
What if the state covered your cost of living? Would you still go to work? Go back to school? Not work at all? What would you do? This concept is called a Universal Basic Income, or UBI, and it's nothing less than the most ambitious social policy of our times. In 2017, basic income is gaining momentum around the world. First trials are ongoing or on their way, and a growing number of countries are considering UBI as an alternative to welfare.
It's worth noting that author Hilmar Schneider has pointed out that these trials to which they reference are mostly small-scale experiments that happen for a limited period of time and are financed externally. That is, the money that is used for these UBIs come from voluntary donors outside of the small-scale economic decisions of the participants. I'm not inclined to put much stock in the results of these trials, since the biggest failure in economics is the failure to see the long-term consequences of a policy. As we go through this video, I want you to keep your mind on the big picture.
How would it work, and what are the key arguments for and against? Right now, people can't really agree what universal basic income is or should be. Some want to use it to eliminate welfare and cut bureaucracy. Others want it as a free extra for existing programs, or even want it to be so high that work itself becomes optional. For this video, we'll talk mostly about the minimum basic income, enough money to be above the poverty line. In the US, this means about $1,000 a month or $12,000 a year.
Economist David Friedman has already pointed out that a UBI of just $10,000 a year would cost between $1 and $2 trillion in the United States. Further, even if we confiscated 100% of the earnings of Americans who make more than $1 million a year, that produces only about $1 trillion of revenue. What does this mean? It means that even a UBI of $2,000 less than what they just proposed would require heavy tax increases on the rich and the middle class alike.
The money would not be taxed, and you could do whatever you wanted with it. In this scenario, UBI is a way of transferring the wealth of a society while still keeping the free market intact.
Yes, another attempt to find an in-between socialism and capitalism. But what exactly will the impact on the free market be?
But if we hand out free money, will people just spend it on booze and stop working?
For those of you who have watched my videos, I'm probably starting to sound like a broken record, but this is important. Anytime someone says the word free, stop them immediately. Nothing in life is free. Someone pays. Let's all say it together now. Nothing in life is free. Someone pays. A UBI would not be free money any more than it is free when you mow your neighbor's lawn for free. You still pay with your time and labor.
A 2013 study by the World Bank specifically examined if poor people waste their handouts on tobacco and alcohol if they receive it in the form of cash. The clear answer: no, they don't. The opposite is true. Other studies have shown that the richer you are, the more drugs and alcohol you consume. The lazy and drunk poor person is a stereotype rather than reality. What about laziness? Universal basic income test runs done in Canada in the 1970s showed that around 1% of the recipients stopped working, mostly to take care of their kids. On average, people reduced their working hours by less than 10%. The extra time was used to achieve goals like going back to school or looking for better jobs.
As I already said, I'm not impressed by the test results of these trial periods. It's not surprising that when people are given extra money for a temporary period, they use it to benefit their lives and don't quit working. The question is, once a UBI is instituted on a permanent basis and it is enough to actually live on, how many people will continue to work full-time jobs? I suspect the answer to this will be slightly different than in these small-scale, limited-time test runs.
But if laziness and drugs are not a huge deal, why doesn't our current welfare state solve poverty? Welfare or unemployment programs often come with a lot of strings attached, like taking part in courses, applying to a certain number of jobs a month, or accepting any kind of job offer, no matter if it's a good fit or what it pays. Besides the loss of personal freedom, these conditions are often a huge waste of time and only serve to make the unemployment statistics seem less bad. Often your time would be much better spent looking for the right job, continuing education, or starting a business. Another unwanted side effect of many welfare programs is that they trap people in poverty and promote passive behavior. Imagine a benefit of $1,000 each month. In a lot of programs, if you earn a single dollar extra, the whole thing is taken away. If you take a job that's paying $1,200, you might not only lose your benefits, but because of your taxes and other costs like transportation, you might end up having less money than before. So if you actively try to better your situation and your total income is not improving or even shrinking, welfare can create a ceiling that traps people in poverty and rewards passive behavior.
I'm in agreement on this point. That being said, a UBI might be the lesser of two evils in comparison with current welfare programs, but that doesn't mean it will work in the long term, as we'll see.
A basic income can never be cut, and therefore getting a job and additional income will always make your financial situation better. Work is always rewarded. Instead of a ceiling, it creates a floor from which people can lift themselves up.
This is abjectly false. Once you reach a certain threshold, your basic income will simply be your own money being given back to you since the money is obtained through taxes. The tax rates that will be required to finance the UBI, alongside all the other forms of government spending, to include universal health care and other programs that most UBI proponents also support, will mean that even middle-class families will likely pay up to 50% income tax or more. Further, if history is any indicator, do you think government spending will ever go down? Or that people will stay happy with a UBI of only $10,000 or even $12,000 a year? Of course not. Over time, there will be pressure to raise the UBI, and in doing so, increase tax rates even further, which will discourage people at the top from working hard and innovating. As Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money.
But even if UBI is the better model, is it economically feasible? What about inflation? Won't prices just rise, making everything just like it was before? Since the money is not being created by magic or printers, it needs to be transferred from somewhere. It's more of a shift of funds than the creation of new ones. Hence, no inflation.
Maybe it won't cause the kind of inflation they're talking about, but it will cause inflation nonetheless. When more money is printed, eventually the prices of all goods and services will rise since the currency pool is larger. However, when money is redistributed from the wealthy to the poor will come out and start buying things that they weren't buying before. Since there is now an increased demand for the things that the poorer demographic wanted but previously couldn't have, the prices of these goods and services will rise to compensate for the increased demand. Just because it's not overall inflation caused by an increased currency supply doesn't mean it won't cause inflation in the very markets that affect the demographic that the UBI is supposed to help.
Okay, but how do we pay for it? There's no right answer here because the world is too diverse. How well off a country is, what the local values are. Are things like high taxes or cutting the defense budget politically acceptable or not? How much welfare state is already in place, and is it effective? Each country has its own individual path to a UBI. The easiest way to pay for a UBI is to end all welfare and use the free funds to finance it. Not only would this make a number of government agencies disappear, which in itself saves money, it would also eliminate a lot of bureaucracy. On the other hand, cutting them could leave many people worse off than before. If the goal is to have a foundation for everybody, there still need to be programs of some sort, because just like countries, people are not the same.
I find it very telling that they don't get into specifics here about how to finance the UBI. Further, as they appropriately point out, do you really think that the government is going to abolish all welfare programs? Of course not. UBI proponents also support universal health care, Social Security, and just about every other entitlement program you can think of. Once the government starts spending, it will only spend more. The UBI might appear to be successful in the short term, but eventually it will bankrupt the country, especially once the people at the top stop working as they see their success stolen from them.
The second way, higher taxes, especially for the very wealthy. In the US, for example, there's been a lot of economic growth, but most of the benefits from it have gone to the richest few percent. The wealth gap is rapidly widening, and many argue that it might be time to distribute the spoils more evenly to preserve the social peace.
Saying the benefits go to the wealthy is just code for people being allowed to keep the money that they worked for. Redistribute the wealth means take other people's money and give it to people that did not earn it for nothing in return. This is theft, plain and simple. As Friedrich Hayek said, there is a difference in the world between treating all people equally and attempting to make them all equal. Further, as I already pointed out, financing a UBI of just $10,000 a year will cost far more than could be paid for only by those who make $1 million or more a year.
There could be taxes on financial transactions, capital, land value, carbon, or even robots. But UBI is not necessarily expensive. According to a recent study, a UBI of $1,000 per month in the US could actually grow the GDP by 12% over 8 years, because it would enable poor people to spend more and increase overall demand.
But even if this is true, it will lead to fewer businesses hiring or taking risks on new products, since they will have less money due to the increased taxes. I'm not going to dispute what this study found out. It may happen over an 8-year period. But the real question is, what will the long-term consequences be? Even if a UBI causes growth in the short term, eventually you'll run out of other people's money.
What about the people who do the dirty work? Who will work in the fields, crawl through sewers, or lift pianos? If you don't need to for survival, will people still do hard, boring, and unfulfilling labor? UBI might give them enough leverage to demand better pay and working conditions. A study calculated that every extra dollar going to wage earners would add about $1.21 to the national economy, while every extra dollar going to high-income Americans would add only 39 cents. There would still be very rich and poor people, but we could eliminate fear, suffering, and existential panic for a significant part of the population. Making poor citizens better off could be a smart economic tactic.
Without knowing it, they've actually just pointed out the biggest problem with the UBI. As Hilmar Schneider notes, price reactions are likely if nobody can be found who is willing to perform low-wage labor. Wages for such work would have to be higher than under the status quo. Although UBI proponents see this development in a positive light, it would actually lead to a worsening of the real income situation of households, since the accompanying wage increases would be reflected in rising consumer prices. Conversely, If for some reason the wages for these types of jobs did not rise, the UBI would dissuade workers from performing them. Consequently, households would be forced to spend their own time on tasks they would otherwise pay other people to do, such as housework or food preparation. In both cases, these households would be worse off than before because they would either have to spend additional money or additional time to get what they used to have. Due to the increased tax burden, the UBI would increase incentives for illegal employment and create even more financing needs. Furthermore, a UBI would destroy incentives for investing in one's education. Not only would it lead to an increased unemployment among unskilled workers, but it would also enlarge the group of workers with low qualifications. Finally, a UBI would serve as a tremendous pull factor for immigration, which would consequently increase financing needs even further.
For some, this isn't enough. They want a UBI large enough to live a middle-class existence. If we set the financial obstacle aside, this idea fundamentally challenges how our society is constructed. By earning money, you earn the possibility to take part in society. This determines your status and options, but it also forces many people into spending huge chunks of their time on things they don't care about. In 2016, only 33% of US employees were engaged at work, 16% were actively miserable, and the remaining 51% were only physically present. Would 67% of people stop working if they could?
That's the thing. I guarantee you that whatever the UBI is set at, over time people would begin to complain that it isn't enough. They'd demand more, that the rich pay their fair share. The more you give out, the more people will demand. Also, the fact that some people are disillusioned with work simply reflects the reality that you get what you earn. An overweight person can wish to be skinny all they want, but unless they diet and exercise, nothing will change. A poor person can wish to be rich, but unless they're willing to put in the work, nothing will change. If you try and counter this reality by stealing from the rich to make everyone rich, everyone will end up poor, not rich. You can try to deny reality all you'd like, but someone has to put in the work for wealth to exist, even if that work is unpleasant. The question is, what are you willing to sacrifice for your wealth?
It would be unfair to portray work as just a chore. Work gives us something to do. It challenges us. It motivates us to improve. It forces us to engage. Many find friends or partners at work. We work for social status, wealth, and our place in the world. We're looking for something to do with our lives. And for many people, work gives them meaning.
But the irony is that under any form of socialism, to include the implementation of a UBI, the more successful you are at your job, the more you'll be penalized by having the fruits of your labor stolen from you. Where then will the motivation to do difficult jobs come from? Who is going to bother going to medical school when they see that being a doctor won't leave them any better off than a garbage man or someone who simply doesn't work and lives off his UBI? Do you really think the personal satisfaction of work is going to motivate a high enough number of people to do these types of jobs?
There are other concerns with UBI. If all welfare programs were exchanged for one single payment, this gives the government a lot of leverage. Individual programs are easier to attack or cut than a multitude. Or populists might promise drastic changes to the UBI to get into power. And a universal basic income doesn't tackle all problems when it comes to inequality. Rents, for example. While $1,000 might be great in the countryside, it's not a lot for expensive metropolitan areas, which could lead to poor people moving outwards and the difference between rich and poor becoming even more extreme. And of course, for some people, the concept of work itself not being essential for survival is appalling.
And appropriately so. The reality is that someone has to do the work or everyone will starve. If everyone didn't work, there would be no food. Wouldn't you gripe if you saw other people living off the fruits of your labor?
So is the universal basic income a good idea? The honest answer is that we don't know yet. There needs to be a lot more research, more and bigger test runs. We need to think about what kind of UBI we want and what we're prepared to give up to pay for it. The potential is huge. It might be the most promising model to sustainably eliminate poverty. It might seriously reduce the amount of desperation in the world and make us all much less stressed out.
Bottom line, the money for a UBI has to come from somewhere. When you rob Peter to pay Paul, Peter finds himself worse off and stops working. Then there's no one left to steal from, and Paul starves as well. This is the fundamental problem with socialism. It may happen fast, it may happen slow, depending on the level of socialism which a country embraces. But the bottom line is, it happens. The only thing that can lift people out of poverty is the free market and the incentives that it brings. Everyone won't end up equal, but they will have equality of opportunity. If you want to be rich, you'll have to work for it. Wealth itself does not exist unless someone works. Well, that's it for today. Once again, I'd like to thank Mr. Dapperton for bringing this video to my attention. And remember, nothing in life is free. Someone pays. Under socialism, everyone will be equal once they're equally poor or equally dead. That's my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth. Thanks everyone for watching. If you liked this video, please hit like and subscribe. You can also hit the bell to ensure you're notified every time I upload a new video. This video was made possible by my patrons. If anyone else would like to donate and help ensure that I have the time and resources to keep putting out content, for just $1 a month on Patreon or Maker Support, you'll receive a shout out at the beginning and end of every video, and the link to one of your social media platforms in the description. You can also follow me on Twitter, Minds.com, BitChute, WordPress, Gab, and iTunes. Uploads are every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, so stay tuned for more videos.